And this is where I always tell people, look, follow the money.
It requires effort. It requires engagement, true engagement. You got to say yes. Some way, somehow, say yes.
That's where the innovation comes. We cannot be complacent.
You've accomplished great things in business that I think you probably could identify a few things that are universal that you apply to all your businesses. And so the first thing I want to talk about is not the profit, the record profit.
Good.
Because we'll talk into some marketing.
It's a byproduct of the other thing.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the marketing. I want to talk about the process that allowed you to get to that. But the first thing I really want to talk about is the 3% turnover. I want to talk about
That's my favorite.
90, and let's reverse it because it sounds better the other way. 97% retention, because that has, whatever you did to accomplish that, has to be, I'll let you say it, probably the key to hitting the profit number.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you think about this, at that time, the attrition rate in the industry was 89%. I think right now it's more in the 65 to 70%. But if you think about this in this context, if you have to replace 65 members of your team this year and I only have to replace 3, doesn't it stand to reason that I'm going to be able to outcompete you? Doesn't it stand to reason that we're going to be more consistent? Doesn't it stand to reason we could spend more time on productive activities and less time on rudimentary tasks or activities or training? It makes all the sense in the world. Now, acknowledging that and getting to that are two different things. I was very fortunate. The patriarch, the founder of that dealership originally was a gentleman by the name of Bill Smythe, and he exuded that culture. I mean, long before Tom Hopkins was talking about management by wandering around, or Jim Collins was talking about good to great, Bill Smythe was walking that walk. I mean, he never passed by a human without acknowledging him. He never passed by a customer without greeting each one individually. He never passed by a piece of garbage without picking it up himself. He never asked anybody to do something that he was very well capable of doing. So he had this tremendous leadership. He had this incredible calm. He could speak with great power without ever elevating his voice. And one of the many things that he taught me is that if you have to elevate your voice or start throwing around expletives, you don't have a strong case. The more you elevate your voice, the weaker your message is. And if you have a strong message, you could speak with a perfect calm and it's going to come through louder, to your point, cutting through a room. I show my wife the DMs that I'm getting from Instagram. I don't show her to brag, absolutely not. But I show her because they're uplifting to me. Here I'm trying to uplift somebody else, and little do they know, by virtue of their message, which may have seemed very simple in their minds, in their hearts. When I get a message that says, I can just tell that you're a very authentic, kind person. You have a sense of calm when you're speaking, or they'll say messages like that. That's simply the highest compliment somebody could ever pay me, because it says that that the authenticity that I strive to have is actually coming through. It's permeating through the noise, or it's being able to get across somebody so that when something comes out of my mouth, it's believable. And not only what I'm saying is believable, but that I legitimately care about a human being I've never even met, and so that's something that's important. So let's go back and talk about that in terms of culture. That's always been part of my core. It's always been, it has always started with people and ended with people for me. So when I got introduced to Bill Smythe and Michael Smythe, and one of the reasons why that dealership ended up becoming my home, and I ended up becoming the dealer there and the president of that organization, is because that was in my core. Yes, I know how to sell cars. I know how to expand a department. I can increase your margins. Yes, I can do a lot of things within a dealership, but they knew that they could put that store in my hands back then because of my belief in culture. And we didn't pay. We were not the highest paying dealership on the street, far from it, but we had the lowest turnover. We had lower turnover. You don't know this. We had lower turnover than the companies in Silicon Valley that at that time were giving away stock options to a receptionist that might have been worth $100,000. I was having a receptionist come in and buy a new E-Class from me for 45 or 50 grand as a receptionist because of the stocks that she received or he received, right? We had lower turnover than they did. And that was important to us. We had something called Smythe Empowerment Drive. I mentioned this in Clubhouse, that after I met Jay and I spent, oh my God, what was it? I think I spent 30 hours with him over the course of 2.5 days and just got this insane transfer of knowledge and this genius of Jay Abraham. And I went back and had a light bulb over my head and I said, hey, guess what? We're eliminating all advertising. No more.
I heard you say this,
right?
And I need to know.
And people thought, okay, you're nuts. We left used car classified ads in place.
Okay.
All other advertising ceased. Instead, we put our money into something we call Smythe European Empowerment Drive Seed. What we did is we served 9 zip codes, and each of the 9 zip codes we wanted to choose one grassroots nonprofit, and we wanted to take that money and give it to them instead. We did it by sharing with them part of the profit of every car we sold. If the car we sold was from that zip code, they got that part of that revenue share. They got that revenue share. And we had our employees get fully engaged, and they were the ones that went through the grant process. They were the ones that vetted out every one of these organizations. They were the ones who ultimately chose the one organization in each zip code. And a funny thing happened. We went from selling 50, 60, 70 Benzes a month to 250. We outperformed every Mercedes-Benz store in the country in terms of growth. We went from $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million in net profit to $25 million. We did nearly 10 times the net profit, nearly 10 times, not of the bottom, not of the average of the top 25%. Nearly 10 times, so something Grant would be proud of. We were 10xing everybody back then, right? And but all of that really emanated from culture. So let's talk about that. Culture wasn't just a mission statement.
You bring up Jay Abraham. It's really also not to its truest form, but somewhat when he talks about host-beneficiary relationships.
Host-parasite.
Yeah, and so, but then without the right culture, the way you guys have set
flat.
this up, it
falls
so
flat.
Let's talk about that, because this is great.
Yeah, so the culture, we met with our employees every single month. We recognized anniversaries every single month. We recognized birthdays every single month. If I saw you and you were my, lot guy, and I would say good morning and call you by name. If I saw you by 3 that afternoon for the 5th time, I would say, how you doing? I call you by name. And what we did, one of the things we did is we taught our managers and our variably compensated associates that please understand that when you have a great month, your compensation goes up, right? All of you get some form of a bonus, right? Because if you sell more cars, you sell more service, you sell more parts, we set a new record for volume. I said, everybody, including me, we all make more money, right? Because we're based on a percentage of net, or we're based on a percentage of gross, or whatever it might be. Please understand that our support people, our lot people, our warranty receivables person, the people in our business office, all they get is more work. There's no bonus for them. So if we sell twice as many cars, they get twice as many work. Congratulations, right? So while you're popping the champagne bottles and excited about taking home twice as much money, and I'm proud of you and I'm happy, But please understand, there's only one bonus that they're going to get in this scenario: respect. So what does that mean? It means that you don't turn in 60% of your deals the last 3 days of the month. We don't do that. We turn in our deals every day so that we don't bury them at the end of the month. They're not up till 10 o'clock at night for 3 days in a row punching your deals you should have had in 2 weeks ago. We close our parts tickets every single week. We close our work in process like every day is the last day of the month, right? So that we didn't have any of these big issues. We had the ability to close our financial statement by noon on the first day, right? To get a financial statement out on the second day. And so acknowledging those people, saying hello to those people, buying those people lunch, buying them coffee, dropping them a Starbucks card, recognizing their kids, knowing what their kids are into. You know, these are all forms of a variable form of compensation. And it's like the great book by Marcus Buckingham, you know, what is it? Now Discover Your Strengths, where he talked about the fact that people go to work for companies, but they quit their managers, right? And so somebody taught me a long time ago, and I'll go back to the Outlier book, to where this is like the movie Sixth Sense as we're talking, because every time you ask a question, it makes me think back to somebody that made an imprint on me. There was a guy named Larry Givicki that I worked for back in the 80s. He gave me my first sales manager job, and he told me something very early on. He said, well, his dad, he was a piece of work, man, like no other, Daryl Givicki, but a great guy. Daryl Givicki, what he taught me, one time he said, so David, how was our weekend? And I said, oh man, Daryl, this was up in Northern California, in Sacramento. It was hot. I mean, it was 105, 110 degrees. And he said, how was our weekend? I said, Daryl, it was a hot one, man. It was 105, 108, 110 degrees. And, you know, I mean, because of that, I mean, it was this and this and this. He said, David, let me tell you something. He said, there's two things in life, reasons and results, and reasons don't count. So why don't you tell me again, how was our weekend? And I went, this is going to be a shorter conversation, right? But he taught me back then, all right, that was something he told me one time, and I never forgot it. It never left my brain. It permeated my brain. It became part of me as a manager. It became part of me as a leader. It became part of me in terms of my accountability to myself, right? So that was a big thing. You know, Larry Givicki said, his son that I worked with, he said, you know, David, when you hire somebody, you know, and I know that they come with a resume and they're making all kinds of promises, please don't forget the chances are you made promises as well. So if you ever let somebody go, the first person you should be looking at is the person in the mirror. Did you do everything you said you were going to do for them? Yeah. Did you provide them the coaching? Did you provide them the training? Did you give them feedback? If you ever let somebody go and it's a surprise, it's an indictment that you didn't. Nobody should ever be let go of an organization and have it come as a surprise to them. That never left my brain. So all along the way, I've been fortunate enough to have these coaches and these mentors that, you know, by the grace of God, you know, were dropped into my life. And by the grace of God, I had enough wisdom at that each age to be able to listen and pay attention and remember those really big, impactful lessons that they taught me. So as you fast forward, and, you know, God puts me in a position where all of a sudden I meet the Smythes, and you get into this intersection between what I've learned, what I've assimilated, what I've had permeate myself, and you know, somebody like a Bill Smythe, who literally lived that every single day in the way he treated every human being. It just caused me to want to elevate as well. You know what that does? It puts you in a position to where you have the unique talent of never again hiring anybody who is going to threaten that culture. You understand for the first time that hiring somebody who sells 30 or 40 cars a month is secondary to somebody who's going to uphold and be a gatekeeper and contribute to that culture. Because at the end of the day, every time you bring somebody into your organization, whether you're a dealership or some other type of company, your culture is about to get elevated or it's about to go into decline. Every time you bring somebody on board, your company's productivity is going to go this way or that way, right? Mm-hmm. So people talk about the law of attraction, the law of accumulation, says everything counts. Literally everything you do today brings you one step closer to your goal or takes you one step farther. And that is especially true with the people we bring in our companies. So here's how it goes down. You start with a belief, tree dies from the top with great culture. You surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. You surround yourself with people that absolutely 100% believe in that same culture, have those same ideologies. You then put it in their hands to bring people in turn that are going to have that same belief. And here's the thing, we adopted the Disney approach to hiring. Nobody was allowed to be hired into our organization unless they were interviewed by a minimum of 3 managers and all 3 agreed you would be good for the culture of the team. So that was a critical element for us. So as that happened, our attrition rate, which was never high, continued to fall and fall and fall, and it dropped to just 3%. And by doing that, don't get me wrong, there was one small double-edged sword tough thing about that, and it was vacations. Because, you would sit there every month and get together the entire team, and I'm talking about 353 people at our height. Where you gathered everybody outside in the patio and you recognized everybody. Well, that could be a long meeting, man, right? Let's recognize the 5 years, the 10 years, the 15s, the 20s, the 25s, the 30s. Yeah. When you've got technicians and managers and business office people that have 15, 25, 30 years in, you try to juggle that schedule where everybody wants a week off or 2 weeks off in the summertime or during the holidays. That was the one tough thing. But man, what a tremendously easy price to pay. And I'll even recant that statement slightly. Oftentimes people will say, hey, you paid the price for going to the gym. You pay the price for being on a nutrition plan. You pay the price for being able to elevate your income. And it's not. You enjoy the benefits from that. That's really what it's about. So we enjoyed the benefits of having that level of collective commitment to culture.
I like what you said in terms of I've never thought of it this way. I've always asked questions because culture is important to us as well. We're looking for people that share our core values, right? But I've never looked at it as every single person you hire, your culture is either going to improve or it is. I've never thought of it like that. And when you think about it, if you've got the wrong person, it's like you're trying to build a house, and then you've got that person that's coming up right behind you taking out the nails, right? Where you've got the wrong person.
It's true. It's a little bit like skin damage. I mean, how many of us grew up thinking that you go out as a teenager, you go out hanging in the sun, you get a sunburn, so what? It fades a few days later. Now I got this magnificent tan. And I look great with this great tan. By the way, this is not a tan. I had somebody in a restaurant. I was sitting one time, and she came up to me and she says, "Oh my God," she says, "How do I get a tan like that?" I said, "Become Mexican." That's what I did. I'm Mexican. I'm Polexican. I'm half Polish and half Mexican. Yeah. So, but anyways, you go out and you burn, and then it becomes a tan. It's great. And what's the big deal, anyways? It fades away. It goes away. It doesn't. I didn't learn until I was in my 40s that all skin damage is collective over your lifetime. So just because the sunburn goes away, the damage remains. Oh, wow. And I didn't know that until I went to a skin doctor for the first time. And so, it's that way. Think about that with culture, isn't it? So I mean, you bring that person on, and then you get that sunburn, you get that damage, and then even if they leave, to a degree, that damage remains. And it's an undertaking. Just because that toxic person left, to a certain degree, that toxic environment permeated other people. Chances are somebody else might have caught that affliction, so to speak, and it's all of a sudden now it's affected you departmentally. So yeah, everybody that you bring on is either going to make you look like a genius or not. Yeah. Everybody you bring on is either going to elevate your culture, get you one step closer to where you want to be, or they're going to take it back the other way. I'm so disheartened every time I open up the Cox staffing study and I see that, women will come into our industry, and how long have we been saying we need to have more people of color, we need to have more diversity, we need to have more women. I mean, let's face 60% of the cars are purchased by women, 89% are influenced by women. We should have more women. Okay, what are we doing to manifest that, right? Culturally, what are we doing? When you look at the Cox study and you see that a woman comes to this business and it's not unusual that they exit the business less than 12 months later, or the average manager has a tenure of 2.7 years, that's not something that I think that any of us would want to put on a billboard, right? So I think that...
Well, it's a revolving circle of...
Yeah, and you could chase the money, chase the money, chase the money.
So it just keeps spiraling.
Right. How many times you bring a used car manager and, all of a sudden, boom, our used car sales go up, and then 90 days later they flatten out, and 9 months later they leave, and then 1 month later you go, oh my God, what is all this water in my inventory?
Yeah.
And then the next used car manager is going, it's not me, boss, it's the guy that you hired before me. Right? And you go, wait a minute, that's what the guy before that said.
Yeah.
So, at some point we've got to come to the realization that if we're going to elevate our industry, we are going to have to take a couple things on in earnest. Number one, we have to do a better job of being our own PR people. As Brian was saying not too awful long ago, and he's correct, I don't know of any other industry that has produced more millionaires or billionaires than this industry. That's astounding when you think about all the other industries out there. I don't know of any other industry where you could come out of high school, maybe didn't even graduate high school. And I was saying I didn't graduate. I took some classes. I went into the U.S. Navy instead, and going to college really wasn't a viable option for me at that time with our situation. So I went and served in the Navy instead, and the Navy allowed me to take some college courses while I was on board of a ship. But I'm not even close to graduating. But it doesn't matter. Even if I didn't graduate high school, I didn't graduate college. I like to say this: you don't need any money down. Make it just like a car deal. With no money down, you could show up in your dealership today, right? Get a job as a salesperson, as a frontline person, as a valet, and 2 years later, you could be making six figures. Yeah. It is 100% possible.
Oh yeah.
5 years later, you could be a dealer, or you could be a GM possibly. 10 years later, you could be a dealer, right? You could own your own store. You look at Alex Flores, started out with absolutely nothing, now owns 4 dealerships. Mike Jackson started out as a technician, chairman of the board at AutoNation.
I'm laughing because when you said in 5 years you could be a dealer, so I dropped out of college. I went a year and a half a semester. My parents were away on a 20 group. I was lot attendant, begging my dad, let me sell. He wouldn't let me do it. So I called one of the sister stores up in Cincinnati and applied for a job. They said, when can you get up here? I said, I can be up there an hour and a half. They interviewed, hired on the spot. I moved out of the house, moved to Cincinnati. A couple months in, the owner of the dealer group I had tremendous respect for and still do, Jeff Weiler, the Weiler Group. Yeah. And sits me down because I had known him well because my dad was a top performer for him for a long time. He's given us baseball tickets and so I just grew up really respecting and idolizing him, right? And so he sits me down and I think, all right, here we go. I'm going to start advancing now. And he pulls me in and first question, why'd you drop out of school? And he starts telling me, in 10 years, when I'm looking at you as a potential general manager, And all I could hear in my head at that point was, 10 years? I didn't drop out of school to wait 10 years. I dropped out of school to get there quick.
Yeah.
If I'd known it was taking 10 years, I'd have stayed in school.
Yeah.
So, but
Could you imagine?
when you said the 5 years, that just came in, it took me back.
Well, and you know what? I mean, you know this to be true. Do you remember, and this, I mean, no offense to anybody who ever sees this. I mean, no offense to any salesperson or any manager, because there's tremendous salespeople and managers in our industry. But I'm telling you, 20 or 30 years ago, there were rock stars wandering that sales floor. Rock stars.
Mm-hmm.
That probably 80% of them would have been managers today. You know, and what's happened is because of attrition, because of massive turnover, because of shifts in business where not that many millennials are excited about working 6 days a week,
Right.
you know, and getting a $75 Mini. How many cars do I have? Oh, and I only need to sell, 70 cars to make $5,000 a month? Sounds awesome. And I just have to give up my nights, weekends, and my social life and my family? Great. No, I mean, that's a tough deal. How many millennials are excited about leaving school and want to turn a wrench for the next 40 years? Not a lot.
Right.
So, you know, we've come to this intersection to where we basically have been spitting out people at a rate of 69% a year, which that percentage, as you know, is much higher in the sales department than it is in the fixed op department. But nonetheless, we've gone through a lot of people. And at the same time, the influx of people interested in this, coming into this business, has dwindled. And so our talent pool in most areas is at an all-time low. So here's the reality. What used to take 10 years, if you come in as a salesperson and you're a rock star, I promise you're a sales manager in 2 years. I promise you. And if you're a rock star sales manager, I promise you, in 3 years, you have an opportunity to become a general manager. GSM minimum, GSM at a big store or a GM.
Everybody wants the guy that's up and coming with the fresh ideas. And in some stores, they look at that as like, you know, I can kind of, not mold, but that's a horrible word. But I guess mentor into what it, you know, and
help them realize their potential. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I mean, I don't think there's ever been a better time to enter the car business. And let me tell you something else is that, listen, we have got to do a better job with PR. You know, when we have people, I've got a project that I'm working on. I won't go in great detail, but essentially all I want to do is I want to highlight anybody and everybody in a dealership where their dealer is interested in me doing this, to where I want to create their story, right? And their story called No Money Down. And you know, tell me why you originally answered this ad to work as a valet or a support person or receptionist in this dealership. What made you answer that ad? Right? And they tell me. And then what did you do to get noticed and be promoted into sales? And then how did you go from sales to sales manager? What did you think that you did different? What lessons did you learn? Who impacted you? And I want to just simply show them, for lack of a better term, the mile markers, the road markers, from the time they answered that ad to 2 years or 3 years or 4 years later, where now they're making six figures, and 3 years before they answered an ad for $12 or $10 an hour. Mm-hmm. These are extraordinary stories, and my belief is if we can amplify those stories outwardly in a clubhouse environment, for example, you know, or LinkedIn environment, you know, how many industries could say that? Come to work for me and, you know, you could be making six figures in 2 years, and say it with all sincerity. Yeah. I don't think it's a lot. So, you know, all you have to do is to have a great work ethic, be open-minded, right? Be honest, high integrity, and have I think an intense desire to serve people. Yeah. Because that is a key to me of anybody that is achieves any level of success or greatness, is I think in almost every case they do have a genuine desire to serve those that are around them, either serve their associates. Their organizational chart tends to be the one that's upside down, where they're on the bottom, frontline person's on the top. That's what ours was, you know, or they want to serve their customers. Kristen Dillard is one of my favorite dealers. You know, a lot of dealers have not that great of a relationship with their vendors or the OEMs. You know, some have great relationships, good relationships. Kristen purposefully, intentionally, for both her and her management team, and I think this is phenomenal. You know, she has that type of relationship, positive, productive, mutually beneficial relationship, collaborative with every one of her OEM partners, every one of her vendor partners. You know, I think Liza Borges does a great job growing an organization doing that the same way. And when you look at people like that, they have that servant leader mentality.
We keep talking about Club. I almost feel like that's one of the reasons it's been so successful and such a big hit.
Why is that?
I enjoy my work in Clubhouse. We brought this up the other night in the room. I think it's the giving. I think it is the helping. And you just get off these rooms. Grant made a joke the other day. We were in that room when with
JT?
No, Tim with Tim Story,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I at the end I said, "It's the best room I've ever been part of." It was just because you felt so good about what was going on in that room, and so when you're on stage and you're giving, opinions and you're trying to help people and you're answering questions, you just get when it's time to end the room. You just feel so good.
It's a high.
It is.
It's a high, yeah. It's just like, it's such a cool thing, the universe. I don't know if, whether somebody believes in a higher power, I do, or just believes in the universe, this, just giant power of the universe. But isn't it interesting that when you give something to somebody, you feel good? When you help somebody, you feel good. When you coach somebody, when you teach a class, or when you're coaching somebody and you see them achieve something great, you get something too. I've never once taught a class or coached a class where I didn't get something out of it as well, that I would consider of great value. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. In Clubhouse, those rooms where people are so excited, genuinely excited to give back, to help somebody, to help them find a piece of the puzzle, or maybe, just maybe, something that's transformative in their life. I mean, what could be better than that?
I mean, it just reason it just provides me so much energy.
Yeah, I've been saying the same prayer every morning, every night, and for as long as I can remember as an adult, and I won't share it, in its entirety, but I will share one small piece of it, and in that I always, will say, God, I pray that today I will leave people better than I found them. I always want to leave every person that I happen to engage with. I don't care if it's somebody who's homeless on the street. I am of the belief that everybody in this earth has the power and the ability to lift somebody up. And even if, for example, if you're on the street, I was homeless at one time. If you have no money, if you have nothing, if you do nothing but look somebody in the eye who's homeless, who hasn't been acknowledged perhaps in days or weeks or months, but if I walk by you and I simply acknowledge you and say, good morning, how are you? Mm-hmm. I promise that's going to be possibly the most valuable thing that happened to that person today. It may even be transformative, for that person. And so in my mind, if you go into a restaurant and the server 5 minutes, 10 minutes later hasn't even so much as gotten you water or a menu, I think a lot of times in my younger days, I would have gotten just aggravated and frustrated and like, hey, can I get some help over here? Now, as an adult, my inclination is when I see that person, man or woman, and they finally look over and they're dreading making eye contact 10 minutes later because they know this first interaction is probably not going to be pretty. But instead you say, listen, I could see that you're absolutely slammed. We're fine. Take your time, do your thing. We'll be good.
Yeah.
Okay? Watch what happens. Not only are you about to get the best service in your lifetime, but every other table he or she has is about to get the best service of their lifetime.
Yeah, 'cause you look
And
at
I
it.
think that's such a powerful thing that somebody taught me years ago. And so I always endeavor to do that, whether it's a salesperson, a manager, a business person, or that's what Clubhouse is
Yeah.
for you. That's what Clubhouse is for me. It gives us the opportunity to leave somebody, maybe multiple people, maybe somebody we don't even know, maybe we were answering one person, but another person over here said, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And we don't even know it. You know, that's true philanthropy. You know, I was saying to somebody a few weeks ago, I think any form of philanthropy is great, but my wife and I, we started a foundation called HDI, Equality for All Foundation, when we moved up here 5 years ago. And we did it because we were always involved deeply philanthropically in San Francisco and knew nobody here. And so wanted to be able to get to know the landscape of need here in the community. And you know, so we'd get involved with organizations 3 ways. Number one is to be able to facilitate relationships between different nonprofits to help them elevate themselves. Also teach a new nonprofit how to would put together that council of mentors for them. So if you were a new nonprofit, I would introduce you, you know, to Beach Pace, for example, from Big Brothers Big Sisters. I would introduce you to Layla from Make-A-Wish. I would introduce you, you know, to somebody from the Dougie Center that does grief counseling for children, you know, or to SEI, to Vicky from SEI, or Kali from Kairos PDX, which is a charter school in a very disadvantaged, marginalized community. They shut the public school down. Elementary school, shut it down. She and a couple other people opened it up, right? And they now outperform the grades of every public school in this city, every single one of them. But anyways, you know, take a new organization and introduce them to these people that have done the big annual events, who know the family foundations, who know how to raise money. So we try to do that too, because the only difference with a philanthropic business is they're still a business. Their customers just don't pay them. Right. So, you know, but the other thing is you just try to give back, you know, in some form or fashion, you know, to people so that you can somehow, some way leave them better than you found them. And so we take no expenses against our foundation. We fund it ourselves because we want 100% to go outward. And then our other core belief is that when we donate money or sponsor an event and they say, well, how do you want it in the program? We don't. You know, that's called marketing. That's not philanthropy, that's marketing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's social marketing. I'll take it. Mm-hmm. I'll take it. But true philanthropy is when you go through a toll booth and you say, here's my $5 and here's another, keep the rest of the 15, pay for the 3 cars behind me. And they don't know who you are. That's when it's, I think, when all of us are at our best. So Clubhouse, to me, gives us the ability to pay the toll of the person behind us without them necessarily needing to, they don't need to thank us, they don't need to pay us. All of us up there, one of the things I love, we do it out of love and out of desire to help. None of us get paid, not a single dollar. And my assistant Sam will tell you, I probably have 8 or 10 Zoom calls every week for a collective revenue of 0, where people that I've met on Clubhouse, or I've said, connect with me, DM me, no guarantees, but I will facilitate some relationships which may prove to be important for you. I'll introduce you to some people, or I will assist you in building up your investment deck or whatever it might be. And you do that just because you want to.
I've heard you talk a lot about that recently.
What's that?
The investment decks, and you actually had I don't remember the tool names, but you had a couple tools that you recommended for helping people that are looking to
Yeah,
build those.
there's some pretty cool tools out there. SlideBean is a really cool one that people can go and, for example, you can see Airbnb's original pitch deck or Uber's pitch deck, and but you could also get templates, and it allows people who've never made a pitch deck in their life to be able to understand what are the elements that are important, what are the pages, and what are the components with each, or elements within each page that are important. And you don't need a 40 or 50 or 60 page investment memorandum like normally you would create that if you were going out for institutional investment. But 95% of the people that we meet on Clubhouse, it's really a friends and family angel type of a scenario.
Right.
And so really what they need to do is they need to be able to refine just their concept, their idea, or their pitch down to somewhere between 8, 10, 12 pages at the most, so that they can, frankly, one of the most important reasons to do that is for yourself. If you can't put that together, you're not ready. If you can't define yourself in the market, you're not ready. If you can't characterize what your magic is, you're not ready. If you don't know your total addressable market, you're not ready. So it's just a great exercise, I think, for any entrepreneur to go through, even if they're just doing a friends and family round.
Let's get back to the create. Where do you get your idea? How do these ideas come to you?
Okay, now you're going to go back to the superpower deal. Okay, so listen, I will tell you, I have a couple superpowers, but I can say them because there's no bragging in any of them. They are as much an affliction as anything else. So I've never, and excuse me for saying this on camera, I apologize. I've never thrown up in my life. In my lifetime.
You're like Jerry Seinfeld.
Not one time. I never have.
Did you ever see that episode?
I don't recall that episode, but I can tell you that I even had, at one time I was in the U.S. Navy, and somebody, I know this is stupid, kids, if you're watching, don't do this. Somebody wagered me $20 whole if I would drink a half pint of Jack Daniels. Because I was a beer guzzling champion at that time, right? So I had the ability to just, I can take a beer at that time and just literally, this was just a canal. And it just went right down my throat. And is recently, I haven't done that for years, but I do recall this absolute truth. I have witnesses, multiple witnesses. One of them was one of the 49ers, that I was at a Warrior game sitting up in a suite, and there was an athlete with him, a big athlete, who, when he heard that I was a beer guzzling champion, he said, "I'll bet you right now, $100. I said, "No, I'm good." So he kept insisting, and finally I said, "Okay, fine." So we both got beer, and I absolutely demolished him. It wasn't even close. It was so bad that I was done. And he was this guy, just desperately trying to empty the container. So, yes, that's one of them. I could guzzle a beer at that time like nobody's business. So what happened was somebody said, "Oh, can you guzzle alcohol?" I was like, "Well, why not? It's not carbonated." So he said, "I'll bet you $20 you can't guzzle, this half pint
I'm a big
of Jack
bourbon
Daniels."
guy. This
right?
is making me ill.
And I was not a big bourbon guy at the time. So I said, "Done." So we walked over to this liquor store just off of the base. This was in north of Chicago, Great Lakes, Illinois. I was in engineering school at the time. And so at the time I had it won't get too deep, but we had dates with the nurses, which were on the other side of the base. So we went out and we were kind of, priming the pump, getting a little warm up in, going to do some beers, and next thing you know, I'm guzzling this half pint. We go back to the base. There's snow on the ground out there, and we're trudging our way through the sidewalks, which thankfully were clear. But by the time I made it to where the nurses' dorms were, I apparently was a little bit of a mess. And so I got pretty sloppy at that time. And so by the time, this nurse that I was going out with was like, what happened to you? And so they told her, and she's like, okay, we need to get you back to the barracks, back to your dorms right away. So we headed back there, and I bit the dust a couple times into the snow, but I made it back on my own. And so they laid me down, and they were so worried that they tried to induce, me to have this go this way, and the paramedics couldn't even induce. I've never. So that's a superpower. Second superpower is my circadian clock is weird. If I jumped on a plane right now and I landed in Singapore tomorrow at whatever time it was, say 9 o'clock at night, I am on their time. I've never had jet lag.
You're instantly adjust.
I've never had Asia, Europe, South America, East Coast, West Coast, doesn't matter.
That's a good superpower.
I've never had jet lag. When people said, oh my God, I'm wiped out from jet lag, I just got back, I'm like, what are you talking? I can't even relate. When my wife was pregnant, in first trimester, having that party, I was like, okay, I don't even know what that's like.
That's a good superpower when you live on the West Coast, because every time you got to go for business on the East, that's the hard way.
And that was my third superpower, was I could stay up 2 days in a row functional. So I could take a red eye. An anti-superpower is I can't sleep on public transportation. So I would fly in red eyes back then, and I'd get on the plane at 11 o'clock, and you land, the drill, you land at 5:30 or whatever it is, 6 o'clock. I get off the plane, I go find a hotel, I take a shower, I change my clothes, never went to sleep. I'm good. I'm brand new. I'm good. Fourth superpower was that I've never had a hangover. Even that night with the no hangover. I don't know what a hangover is like.
Wow.
Weird deal, right? So I have a number of those real peculiarities that have, for the most part, served me very well. So, those are the only types of superpowers that I really feel like I have, is those just weird human oddities with my body. But I don't think of myself in any way, shape, or form in terms of having any superpowers when it comes to the business side.
So you bring up Jay Abraham.
Yeah.
All right. As a mentor.
Greatest marketing mind of all time.
And he clearly helped you when you decided to change your marketing strategy and approach at the dealership, right? Tied into the culture. If you had to break down a couple things, some of the things that you learned from him, besides what we already talked about, what would you say had the biggest impact on your success? Just one or two.
I think one of them is the strategy of preeminence, to be sure. I think that's one of the most overlooked ones. I believe that if you were to analyze 1,000 businesses, you would find that nearly all of them are not leveraging that. They're not aware of that, and worse yet, they're actually, in dealerships are a really good example, right? I mean, strategy of preeminence is asserting that you are committed to delivering a profoundly better client experience than anybody else around you. And what that does is it puts you in a position, and I look at it this way with software. We've created software. I'm on my 8th software company now. I've got 5 in development right now. And when you create software, my number one goal is to achieve product superiority. Well, technically, my number one goal is to create something that doesn't exist. Reverse risk never existed. The intelligent dealer never existed. Health check it never. I like creating things that would be referred to as a category creator. But no matter what, even if it's a category creator, ultimately you're going to have other people that come in the market to compete with you, because anytime you prove that there's a marketplace for it, you're going to get copycats or people that want to come in, and that's okay. That's the nature of business. You just want to make sure that you can claim product superiority. Why? Because when you have product superiority, you can be unapologetic about price. It's the old Zig Ziglar. I'd rather apologize for price once than apologize for the experience for the lifetime that customer has it. It's brilliant, right? It's brilliant. And so product superiority does that. Well, the strategy of preeminence was a really phenomenal reminder, or really clarified that for me, that in that realm, it's not about product superiority, because let's face it, in many businesses, it's a commodity. If you're selling Hondas or Chevys or Fords or Mercedes, I'm sorry, to a degree, it's toilet paper. It's a commodity, right? Why? Because I can get, and now that we've got the interweb, right, where I can buy a car anywhere, the manufacturer doesn't like this, because it's got warranty implications, as you know, but I could buy a car anywhere. Yeah. So it's a commodity. So the strategy of preeminence was really important, because if we could deliver the preeminent, the superior client experience, then we had every right to be able to sell on value and for that whole experience. The other thing I learned too is this, and I didn't learn this from Jay, but I give Jay all the credit for this too, because it was like an incidental learning. What I learned from that is that you could divide all clients into two categories: time over money or money over time. Please let me explain. There are two types of customers in the world, no matter what it is you're selling: time over money or money over time. People that value time more than money, or have more time than money. People that have more money than time. So when you're dealing with a client, if you have a customer walk into your Ford store, Chevy store, Mercedes store right this second, right after you watch this, you need to figure out whether they value time over money or money over time. Why? Because you're going to treat them differently. You're going to give them the same spectacular experience, but the way you get to that experience is different. Let me explain. Somebody who values time over money, Warren Buffett, he's willing to pay the price for your product as long as you value his time appropriately, right? So if you get me in and get me out, let me put it this way. How many times have you been in a doctor's office? You have an appointment at 8:30. You show up, you did your part, you showed up at 8:15, right? And they say, it's just going to be just a few minutes. You go to a restaurant, you have a reservation. Sydney has a reservation at 7 p.m. tonight. I show up at precisely 7 p.m. Oh, it's just going to be 10 or 15 minutes. You want to get your table ready, right? Did I surprise you? Was this like, did I parachute in? Don't you have open table? Don't you have a reservation system? Didn't you know I was coming? This is something Jerry Seinfeld would say, like, what's the deal with, right? Like, what is the deal with the reservation, right? So, but we don't get respected. But if you have a situation where you say, okay, listen, when you make the reservation on open table, you could either do this, normal reservation, you may have to wait 10, 15 minutes, we don't know, maybe 30, right? Or you could be open table premium, open table VIP, and that one, you pay $5 per reservation or $25 per reservation. When you walk in, you get seated immediately. Which way are you going? Yeah. Okay, if you say the former, you're a money over time person. Listen, I'm not paying $25. I got 15 minutes. I'm cool, right? But if you're a time over money person, I'll pay the $25. Doctor's office, tell you what, double my copay. Let me walk in right now. You want to make money, free money, doctor's office, which, by the way, I'm sorry, if she was standing here, I'd say it right in front of her. Doctors are some of the worst business people on earth, right? If you said every time, Mr. Spisak, if you just pay an extra $50, you can get into the little room, right? The $25 will put you in the little room right now. If you pay us $50, I'll put you in the little room and I'll walk the doctor in with you. Bam. Yeah. Okay. I don't have time. Yeah. Right. I can't replace that time. So it's a really important lesson. And it's an extension of that strategy of preeminence.
I love it, and I noticed that you keep using the word client, which is also another thing you learned from him instead of customer. And so, but to me, what you're talking about with the strategy of preeminence, it's so important because you brought up the word commodity, right?
Yeah.
And so the marketplace is always, and I'll use some of this will sound very familiar. The marketplace is always trying to marginalize and commoditize us because it makes products cheaper, all right? That's what it wants. And so the first thing that the people that I see that are able to strike back against that, all right, and win, they don't believe they're a commodity. And when you don't believe you're a commodity, it forces you to prove it. I have
Good
to
point.
create a better customer experience.
Good point.
I have to match.
It's accountability.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think it really starts there. And those people just refuse to accept that buying from me is the same as buying from someone else. They refuse to accept that. And then they prove it.
And you know what's interesting is how many times have you subtly or not so subtly seen an organization, whether they paid Jay or oftentimes didn't pay Jay or didn't give Jay any credit, which they should have, but that they master that strategy of preeminence, and it benefits them greatly. And the thing that's amazing, I was saying this just 2 days ago to somebody. They had mentioned a cliche, and I said, you know why cliches are cliches? Because they're true. Mm-hmm. If they weren't true over the long period of time, it wouldn't be a cliche. So when you have something that, and we were talked about earlier on, the difference between good, great, and epic. Jay's at epic level. His brain is at epic level, and he is a mad scientist. I mean, you've spoken to him. It's like, try to keep up with that brain as it's moving in real time and trying to take notes. It's
I'll give
crazy.
you an example.
But just to wrap up this point, the strategies that he's put out there have stood the test of time. Every industry, every vertical, this decade, last decade, decade before, they just flat work. Sorry, what's the example?
Well, what I was going to say is he always talks about, and I've been in other rooms where they talk about, and some great marketers in there, and they're always talking about, I'm trying to take the agency, right, and we do well, from this level to just, I don't know if we'll say epic, but epic would be great. 5-10 times what it keeps bumping its head up against. Very similar to what you described in a former interview about Smite, when it was consistently producing this, which was a good number, but you knew it could do better, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting here listening, and everyone brings up the same stuff. Well, you need multiple lead sources, and I get that. But what Jay does, and I paid attention to this the other day, because I think a lot of business leaders make mistakes thinking, okay, let's say I read something to Jay's, and all right, he says I need referrals, right? And I need to do some type of back-end product. Auto industry is great at that, right? And I need, let's do digital direct mail. He's got a lead source coming in from there. The difference, though, is when he says, let's take referrals, for instance. He breaks them down. In other words,
he breaks a handshake down.
It isn't just one way to get a referral. And I missed that in all my studies. And that is actually something I just learned recently with him. As I'm sitting here saying, he doesn't just say, all right, here's my one referral method. No, he's saying you should have multiple ways and channels to bring referrals. And it's just, it blows me away that it upsets me that I missed something so simple.
But the level of, you're spot on. I mean, he literally the other day broke down a handshake, because, and we all know inherently, we've all shaken hands with, the wet fish guy. Who likes that wet fish guy or the guy?
And for the record, we just bumped elbows. All right.
That's right. Or the person that just gives you this part of their fingers. I don't know what is that. Why can't you give me all of your fingers?
You should shake my wife's hand.
Right.
You'd be impressed.
Thank you. You want that full lock there, right? You want to feel that grip there. When somebody just gives you this, you're like, ugh, right? So, anyways, but he breaks it down where you have the regular handshake, where you could shake somebody's hands, and you could say, hey, nice to meet you. Or you could say, hey, it's nice to meet you. Or you could say, nice to meet you, as your hand is on their shoulder. Or I would always do the one where I would shake your hand, and I would place my other hand on your forearm, right? Now, obviously, day and age. It needs to be appropriate, can't be unwanted, unwarranted, right? You could do the people you know, perhaps. And where it's appropriate, you should ask permission. And where it's appropriate, you should just shake their hand. But the point is, you take just that, or you take how somebody's greeted when they walk into an organization. We've all been in that situation where somebody gives you eye contact, or they give you a smile, or they act like you're the greatest thing that happened to them today, even though they might have been having the toughest day of their life, right? And that's the thing that's really remarkable about Jay is you could have somebody who say, okay, hey, here's the 10 steps of the sale. In Jay Abraham's world, that would be, let me introduce you to the 1,000 steps to the sale. Here's 100 steps for each of the 10 steps, right? And because he breaks it down to that detail, and what he's doing in the process, his intention is never, okay, let me make this more complicated, more difficult. Let me open your brain to seeing things in a different light, in a different perspective, so that you no longer limit yourself, regardless of what you're doing or how well somebody thinks they're doing. You know, at Smythe, if you went up to any dealership and they said, we doubled our net profit, there'd be a good percentage that would go, we're there, we're good.
Yeah.
I asked that management team, are we there? Nope. We could do better. We could do this. So next
I
year
wrote that down. I picked that up.
goes
in
from
something you said.
1.3 to 3.1. I mean, from 3.1, then it goes to 5.6. You go, wow, 5.6 not quite double. Are we done? No. Bam, it goes to 8.1, goes to 12.8, goes to 16.7. Now, who in their right mind at 16.7 million a year? Think about that for a second. Okay, so if you think about that, put that in context, that's a 1.4 million a month. Put this in context. The average dealership in the United States doesn't make 1.4 million in a year, 1.4 million in a month. And you know what they say? We could do better. And so what do they come back with? $25 million a year. And let me tell everybody something that may not know this. You know, it's been well known, you know, we're the $25 million store. What you don't know is that store was actually $30 million. It was close to $30 million that year. And the only reason that we posted 25 is we gave the other 5 to the managers. That's why, right? But the store legitimately made nearly 30 million. Think about that. Think about that. That's over $2.5 million, $2.2 million, $2.3 million a month, in nearly double in a month what the average store makes in a year. So, you know, the way that happened was, first of all, no redacted financial statements. Every manager got every page of that financial statement except for page 1, right? But there was no lines that were redacted. They saw everything. Owner salaries, they saw bonus, they got all of it. The technicians knew how much the service department made. We wanted them to know that. Why? Because a lot of times your technicians, if you're charging $100 an hour, somehow they may think there's $100 an hour going into some kind of ginormous safe. And you know that $100 an hour turns into $73 maybe in gross, and that maybe has 45% VSG, and, you know, trickle down. And so by the time you get down, you know, you might be keeping 10 cents on the dollar, right? And you want us to make money if you're an associate. Why? Well, it's called job security. Why? It's called promotions. Why? Because we could buy more stores. Why? Because then you could get promoted into another dealership, right? So, I mean, this is why all this kind of, you know, comes around. And if you're so lucky to get exposed to Jay Abraham's principles or strategies, you know it literally is transformative. It'll never leave your brain, and you'll be amazed at how what you learn specific to marketing actually starts to permeate other aspects of the way you think with respect to business. Because if I can remove the limitations here, why do I need to sit in a box with respect to recruiting? Why can't I recruit differently than everybody else? Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people don't know this. Of the top 10 online recruiters, I can't say for last year, I don't know. But for years, you would see companies like Google on there, or Apple would be on there, of course, Amazon might be on there. You know who else is on there? Reynolds and Reynolds, right? And that's probably astonishing to people. Reynolds and Reynolds. And I'll tell you something else. If you think about how hard it is to get into Duke or Stanford, think about this. Roughly only 5% of all applicants get into somewhere like Duke, Stanford, Harvard, somewhere like that. It is 10 times harder to get a job at Reynolds and Reynolds. Only 0.5% of all applicants get hired at Reynolds and Reynolds. So regardless of whether somebody loves Reynolds, doesn't like Reynolds, loves their products, doesn't like them, whatever they think, the reality is, if you look at the quality of the people that come in there in terms of their professionalism, their intellect, their academic backgrounds, it's astonishing and it's just remarkable. But then when you consider how good would your staff be, no matter what business you're in, how good would your staff be if you got 10 times, 15 times, 100 times more applicants for every position versus what you get now? Think about that. The quality of the applicants and the quality of the person you ultimately brought on would elevate. And I'll tell you something else. People are much more likely to work harder, take more pride, and stay longer in a company where it was much harder to get a job than a company where anybody can get a job. Yeah, as long as you could fog a mirror, you're in. Yeah, what do you got, a pulse? You're in. You're in the club. Don't worry. You know, those are like the ones that turn over at the rate of 100%. So recruit differently. Don't just sell differently. Don't just market differently. Recruit differently. You want to retain differently, you better recruit differently.
You ask better questions. That's one of the things that I'm going to add that to your vision and execution.
It's another mentor that taught me that.
Well, just the simplicity of, is there more? At the end of every year, as you grew that revenue or that profit number, is there more? My question I have, and if you're at 97% retention, I know we're way over. This, by the way, this is going to have to be a two-parter.
It's turning into a mini-series.
Yeah, but this is like major gold here.
Thank you.
And so,
I've enjoyed the conversation.
Is there more? Did you ever have, my guess is not often, 97% retention. Did you ever have anybody said, nope, no more?
In this organization?
Without naming names. No, any time,
yes.
When you were growing the dealership, did anybody ever tell you,
yes.
Nope, no more?
Yes.
How did you handle it? Or how did it evolve?
So here's a funny thing.
But we'll make this the final question.
Here's an interesting thing. If you have, if you're living a congruent life and you have congruency in your dealership, it simply means that what you portray and what is are one and the same. You have consistency, you have fairness, you recruit great people, you create an environment where everybody can be a co-architect in the success of the dealership. You don't have one-offs. You don't have sacred cows. You better not have sacred cows and then tell me, hey, I can't get there. Okay, get rid of your sacred cows. But when you do all those things, what happens is the environment itself, the culture itself, everybody down to your support people expects more. They expect more.
Well,
they expect more from each other. They expect more from their interactions. They expect more from their leaders. And so what happens is, if you do get somebody who says, I'm tapping out, I don't think there's any more, what happens is they just leave.
Yeah.
They just leave. And that's okay, because the idea is not, to, hold everybody in for, hold on for dear life. And we've learned in every aspect of our lives growing up that you can't hold on tightly. You need to hold on loosely. And the thing is that, that about friendships, relationships, or, romantic relationships. We learn this at some point, hopefully growing up, and it absolutely applies to business. You want people that are on board. You've heard that expression.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if they're on board, don't make them a hostage, right? And you don't want, and I'm not saying you make them hostage because you're saying you can't quit, you can't leave. But sometimes we will, you'll see people will be guilty of paying somebody more than you should pay them because you don't want them to go, right? Because you're married to their productivity, even though you know darn well that their very existence is damning your culture and damning your growth and retarding your growth.
I think it's an expensive lesson that probably every business leader has had to learn the hard way.
And you have to learn it. It's okay, you have to learn it. It's only a mistake if you keep repeating that mistake. So yes, at some point, listen, Apple has people that leave. Right? Amazon has people that leave. Microsoft has had people that leave. And for a variety of reasons. And I'll leave you with this. So if somebody wants to tap out, if there's no more, that's fine. It's just like I've always said, listen, I don't care what you believe. What your religious beliefs are. I am a spiritual person. I'm not going to inflict that on you. You're going to go out and learn what you learn, choose what you want to get exposed to, and draw your own conclusions. But my simple choice is to live as I live, and you can deduce from that whatever you want, right? So I'm not begging anybody to buy into my way of thinking. And when I run a dealership organization, it's the great Jim Rohn said this one time. He told me that he saw a billboard going through Reno one time, and the billboard said, "We don't hire nice people. We don't train our people to be nice. We just hire nice people." Think about that. So you don't want to train people, force people, coerce people, pay people to somehow, okay, if I pay you this, if I give you this, if I change your title, hey, would you not sabotage? No. You want people that are running towards your organization, running towards your culture, and want to be there because they love to be there, they appreciate it, and because they get something inherently from it, at baseline. And, that's what makes a tremendous organization. Show me an organization that has a minimal turnover, and I'll show you an organization that's winning, right? It's just like... you could tell a lot about somebody based on their friends that they keep, right? Yeah. Show me your friends. Show me who you hang out with, and I'll know an awful lot about what you stand for, who you are, and what level of success you're able to achieve. So I think those things are important. We end this conversation seemingly with the way we start. All starts with people and it ends with people. So perhaps this is an appropriate place to finish, because at the end of the day, if anybody wants to elevate their business more than ever in this day and age, if you want to stand apart, if you want to activate the strategy of preeminence and deliver a superior client experience, how do you do that if you don't have a superior team? And I'll leave you with just one thing. Whenever I'd work with a dealership, I'd say, Mr. or Mrs. Dealer, I want you to imagine you're standing on your showroom floor right now. I want you to imagine your biggest competitor, that dealer, is standing straight across from you. Now, your GSM or right-hand person is here, your CFO, and so is theirs. And you go all the way down the line. And I want you to look at them, and I want you to now look down the line of yours, and I want you to say, can this group of people take this group of people? And if they can't, you better take a really hard look at your culture. Like Larry Givicki said to me, you better take a hard look in the mirror, and you may want to reinvent your recruiting, your retention, your culture, and your training, because you're never going to get up to Mount Everest, much less live up there, unless you can figure that part out. It's all about people.
It's a great way to visualize that. That is an outstanding way to visualize that. And there's probably a lot of business leaders who are sitting back right now, or whoever's watching this, and thinking, yeah, there might be some
And
Or
any
it's on my
GM
team,
can do
it's
this,
not
service
that wonderful.
manager, anybody in the store.
Yeah.
And if you're a manager, do that exercise. And let me know if you think you're going into that war, into that battle, or into that game and saying, oh yeah, we got this. Absolutely. Because if you do, now all you have to worry about is execution, which is what you said. Vision and execution.